All right, and I think now we could go ahead and get started. I think more people are coming in, but we will reiterate the important parts as we go along. So let's get going. So hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event with Jennifer DeLeon and Sujeidy Palmer for Don't Ask Me Where I'm From. My name is Alex, and I'm the events director at Brookline Booksmith in Brookline, Mass. If you're familiar with our store, welcome back. If this is the first time you're hearing about us, welcome. We're very happy to have you all join our community this evening, and we appreciate your support of the author and an independent bookstore through your purchases and through your attendance. It really means the world. I think everybody is having a tough year, and every time you turn out to support an author and a small business like us, you're making it a little bit better. So this is just a reminder, speaking of which, that if you buy copies of Don't Ask Me Where I'm from the Booksmith website today, you will be able to have them signed and personalized by Jen. Just say what you would like the book made out to in the comments as you check out, and we'll be dropping the link to the book into the chat a couple times. So you can follow that and bring home something nice. I'll also remind you that the holidays are like very soon, which is crazy because it's September. But if you're looking for great YA gifts, what could be better than a signed book? So today's event, aside from that, is also very special because it is a wonderful collaboration between our store, author Jennifer DeLeon, and Teach for America. We're pleased to be able to use this evening and our platform to focus on teaching and learning, and I very much hope for all of the teachers in our audience, this is an event that will bring you a sense of energy, but also a sense of peace. I think everyone who knows a teacher right now knows that no matter how your district is reacting to and grappling with COVID, you are in a tough position, and your best still feels like not nearly enough. It's really difficult, and we want to thank you for meeting here with us today in what has to be a challenging time for all of you. And as part of an appreciation for that, Teach for America are sponsoring a class set of Don't Ask Me Where I'm From, which will be raffled off at the end of this event. If you signed up for this event, if you are here in this room, you are in the drawing. So we'll draw that name at the end. Good luck to everybody. As I said before, the chat and question box are open, so feel free to make use of those. We'd love to hear your questions. As much time as can be given to audience questions would be amazing. Please note that the Brookline Booksmith events series has a strict policy against abusive behavior and language, and at our discretion, any attendee can be removed from an event for partaking in such behavior. So, tonight's event, it will be moderated by Sujeidy Palmer. Sujeidy is a 2012 Massachusetts homegrown alum. As a student, Sujeidy participated in the Meco program, so instead of attending her neighborhood school, she attended school in a predominantly white, wealthy, and high-performing district outside of Boston. This experience gave Sujeidy greater educational access and sparked a frustration about the unfair ways that our educational landscape is set up. After graduating from University of New Haven, Sujeidy returned to Massachusetts as a TFA Corps member serving at Spark Academy in Lawrence, Massachusetts, as a founding teacher. Sujeidy now serves on the TFA staff as the managing director of Teacher Prep Program, where she hopes to continue the fight of dismantling the system that creates disparity in the quality of education based on zip code, income, and race. We're very, very happy to have her and the support of the program with us tonight. Author Jennifer DeLeon is the author of Don't Ask Me Where I'm From and the editor of Wise Latinas, Writers on Higher Education. An assistant professor of creative writing at Framingham State University and a Grub Street instructor and board member, she has published prose in over a dozen literary journals, including Plowshares, Iowa Review, and Michigan Quarterly Review. Her essay collection, White Space, Essays on Culture, Race, and Writing, will be published by UMass Press in spring 2021. She was a 2002 Teach for America Corps member in the Bay Area, California, and currently she lives outside of Boston with her husband and 2 sons. Don't Ask Me Where I'm From is a smartly realized novel about high school, class, race, and code switching, and about the family trauma that can impact young people even when they don't know the extent of what their loved ones are carrying. It's going to be a wonderful addition to school libraries and to the stories that keep students company as they're dealing with their own struggles and joys. It's a pleasure to have the author with us tonight, so without further ado, I turn things over to Jennifer DeLeon and Sujeidy Palmer.
Yay! So excited to be here. I'm so excited, Jen, to be able to talk to you. I loved reading this book, and I'm going to dig right in with my first question. about this theme of code switching. At the beginning of the book, Hennessy tells Liliana, make the most out of Westberg. It's like the real world, and you should stick with it, take it in stride, get yours, do you. And I remember reading that and thinking of other Hennessy's in my life that gave similar advice of both be authentic and you have to code switch to succeed. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on like what can we do as educators to make it so that our students don't feel like code switching is required for them to be successful in school.
Right. Oh my God, it's such a rich question. I'm grateful that you asked it, and I'm just grateful to the Booksmith, to you for being here, to Teach for America. You know, just to back up for a tiny bit, I got out of college and I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer, but I had no idea how to do it. So I worked for a congressman for a year. And at the end of that year, or I guess in the middle of that year, I applied for Teach for America. And I remember telling myself, like, if I get in, I'm going to do it. And I applied like the furthest away I could go, which was the Bay Area. And I got in at San Jose teaching 3rd and 4th grade bilingual. And I just, I'll never forget that experience, you know, teaching there. And so then coming back to Boston, staying in education, working in Boston public schools, it really shaped me as a person, as a writer. And this topic of code switching, I never knew it had a name growing up. You know, it's something that I just kind of did. I grew up in a predominantly white town, although now it's much more diverse, Framingham. We had Meco in our school. And I remember learning about it and kind of asking myself, like, why do the kids in Meco have to like get on a bus, come to school here, and then get on a bus at the end of the day and leave? Like, I was like confused about it. And I was like, who's in Meco? Sometimes teachers asked me if I was in Meco. And so all of that, but with code switching, I felt like when I was at school, I was one gen. I did lacrosse, I did volleyball, I took French, I was involved in clubs. And then when I was on the weekends spending time with my extended family in Jamaica Plain, which is where I was born, I felt like a different gen. Like I was speaking in Spanglish.
Yeah.
It just was a different environment. And it wasn't until kind of going to college and then doing Teach for America and then coming back to Boston, all of those experiences that solidified for me this notion of like being a chameleon essentially and being a different person in different environments. And I think that all of that perspective and knowledge, like years later, has me looking back on my own experience, wishing I could go back in and ask teachers to have more books that are reflecting my culture and more books that are asking questions, even if we don't know the answers to them, and just kind of celebrating diversity instead of kind of maybe being afraid of it. And I feel like in the 90s, we definitely were a little bit like, I'm colorblind, I don't see any color, you know, we went through that whole thing. And I think it's sad, you know, like it shouldn't be that way. So anyway, I think schools can have lots of practical things. You can have classrooms that are just like, if you have a bulletin board for scientists, you know, have scientists of color up there, have students put their own pictures up there and be like future scientists, you know, there are concrete ways, but definitely the literature. And then also having teachers have more professional development, culturally responsive teaching, leaning into these conversations across content areas, not just kind of having it be this one assembly once a year. So anyway, I have a lot to say clearly, but those are some ideas, but I'm dying to hear what some of your ideas are. And if you can like share with everybody a bit of your experience with Meco.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing those reflections, Jen. Yeah, I was a Meco student myself. I joined Meco in 4th grade and went to schools in Wellesley Public Schools from 4th grade to 12th grade, and thought and knew the word code switching very young, and because it was something that we discussed. I was lucky that I had a lot of Meco directors, similar to Mr. Guevara, that were incredibly thoughtful, and it's created space and like, had Meco students reflecting on like what do they mean to hold so many like dual identities. And I think a lot about like, when I think about code switching, like I was taught it as like a tool to be like survive and like, and I think back on that moment and I think about then what I told my students of like, it's actually like it's like a consequence of a racist society.
Exactly.
So it's like a defense mechanism. It's like a tool that I'm using to protect myself, but it shouldn't be a tool that I need. And I think a lot about like, what does it mean to tell students both things? Because sometimes when we're like, yeah, like you have to, this is the way that you present yourself. What I'm hearing is like, oh, so the other way that I like, the way that I talk to my mom or the way that I am with my friends from Boston isn't right or professional or okay. Like that's the message I hear. And so how do we communicate to students of like, actually like what I'm telling you is when you're writing essays, you write this way. And when you're writing creative writing, you can write in whatever way, like how are you differentiating? Because I think even the way that we think about formal speech or not feels like it's telling kids messages that it shouldn't be.
Right.
I also think about kind of what you said, representation, and what does it mean to not just have it in books and on paper, but also like, who are the people in front of students? Like, do they look like them? Do they eat the same food as them? Do they celebrate similar cultural holidays? Having windows is important, but not having any mirrors can have a really big impact as well.
Totally. And you're so right. Like the thing about what are my teachers eating and what are the kids notice everything.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, what music is playing in their car when they get in their car? You know, what stickers are on their laptop? Like what books are they reading for fun?
Yes.
Or what are they valuing? And good God, they hear everything too. You know, like what are you saying in the hallway? And I guess now it's virtual, but you know, I feel like we pick up on that the teacher culture, and if the default teacher culture is white, then that's a problem. And so I think you're so right about like, okay, we're using code switching as a way to protect a larger racist society and systemic racism. So one way to counter that is to kind of unpack it and talk with students openly about why does this exist? Why is it this way? And what can we do about it? And then celebrate our identities, you know, and kind of like not hide them. And I think for Liliana in the book, you know, she goes from being like, don't ask me where I'm from. I'm sick of that question. I'm not trying to tell anybody like for the 100th time. I'm just me. I'm from, you know, my mother, right? But by the end, I think she starts to see it as a question that has lots of, I guess, potential, like, or openings for discussion. And it depends how it's asked, you know. So I know it's like, it's so much, it's so complicated, but I think just asking these questions is important.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of that moment where she reflects and she's like, it's not her teacher put her on the spot and she like didn't want to change. She's like, that's annoying. And then she's like, actually, it's like not just annoying, it's also hard. And I don't want to be, and like this idea of speaking on behalf of others, which I think then tied to this theme that you really brought through, especially in the second half of the book of like, what is the role of allies creating a culture, a school culture? Yeah, I'm curious, how should students be allies? How do we teach our students to do that?
I know. And it's like, because you have Holly who wants to be an ally, and she's a real friend to Liliana. And there are moments where I think Holly feels almost like pushed out. And I don't know if you had this experience, but like I went to a very white, very affluent private college. And I remember having this feeling of like, so I'll just tell you. So like the second day of college, they had this Unity House had this barbecue, and it was like, students of color, come to this barbecue. Yeah, like bring your friends. And I was so excited. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna tell my roommates and the girls down the hall. And so I invited my friends Katie and Jamie. and they both had blonde hair, and we walked over. One was wearing like jean overalls. I remember exactly. And I'm like, guys, let's go to this barbecue. And they were down, we went and we like turned the corner and you see the grill, the smoke from the grill. And it's like all these people, like students of color, like turn. And I swear it was this moment, like the music stopped. And I was like, I didn't get the memo. Like, don't bring your white friends, like, and I didn't understand that it was like this space.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was very complicated for me. And I felt in college many times like I had to choose. Like, I gotta like be involved in Unity House, but then I also was like, well, Jamie and Katie are my friends, and like, so I felt like constantly pulled. And I think for them, they wondered how they could be allies. And there were times where we had some difficult conversations, but I think they were open and willing to listen and to understand in ways that, I'll be honest, really surprised me, like, and opened my eyes to what allies can do and be.
Yeah, no, that resonates with me. I think Liliana talks about the Meco Table, and we very much had a Meco Table at my high school, and all of the Meco students sat together, and and I had and still have many white friends, but it's like the understanding the purpose of in the different spaces of like, oh, there are times where I needed to be with other folks who were also Meco students, who were also dealing with microaggressions and breaches, or also like were eating the same lunch I was. And there are moments where you need to process with someone that I'm going to tell you this thing and you're immediately going to understand why this upsets me. And there are moments that I'm going to engage with my white ally friends, right? And I think when I was a kid, particularly in high school, I remember there was they started doing these like mix it up days where like you got pizza we had a mezzanine, like the Meco Table was on the mezz, and the tables downstairs where most of our white peers sat, and like if you switch, there's pizza, and it felt like that meant like that we shouldn't be separated that much, right? And I was like, oh, like is this bad that we're like segregated? And it wasn't until I read Why Do All the Black Kids Sit in the Couch that I was like, oh no, literally that's what that was. It was a space where I was with my white peers all day, and felt like I had to code switch and felt like I had to be less than my authentic self. And so there were moments where I just needed to be with other people of color, and specifically other people of color who were feeling similarly like they had to play this game to like process that. And it wasn't until after I graduated that I realized like, oh, this is not a unique thing to me in my high school. This is true in a lot of spaces where folks don't feel like they have other spaces to process.
Completely. And I think teachers need to know that, if they don't already, it's this kind of like, because I think the impulse sometimes can be like, oh, come on, like you're all the way from Boston, now you're here, like integrate. It's like, but we need this space to refuel. And you're so right. So I think these conversations are so critical, because I think there are so many well-meaning teachers who like want the best, of course, for students, but the best looks and means different things depending on who you are.
Jen, I would love for you to read us an excerpt from your book if you'd be willing.
Sure. Oh my God, I'd love to. Okay, so this is a scene in the book where it's toward the end, but basically Liliana has gone through a lot. She starts off her journey not knowing much about herself, feeling maybe uncomfortable in her own skin. She changes her name from Liliana to Lily, and that's a real kind of sign of her trying to assimilate. And so she, at the end, comes up with this exercise for students to do as part of like a diversity assembly. So I'm just going to read a little bit from that part. Okay. And in what seemed like a blink, the assembly was starting. It ended up having a whack name, Westburg High for diversity, because that's all the administration would approve. Inside the packed auditorium, a guy sitting a row ahead of me took a piece of notebook paper and rolled it like a blunt. The kid next to him cracked up. Meanwhile, we played the slideshow with quotes and pictures of famous civil rights leaders and photos of the walls while everyone settled into their seats. After the last slide, the principal said a few words about the disappointing online activity of late, and the school chorus sang a few songs, the national anthem and I See the Light. The dean talked about our school moving on from these episodes to better race relations. He also read some official blah, blah, blah about how the Westburg School District is dedicated to a policy of non-discrimination. The dean droned on and on. The assembly, a few songs, a Boringville speech, even I could do better than that. I could. Excuse me, I had to. And finally, it was our turn. The audience went silent, spooky silent, as Rayshawn, Anthony, Brianna, all of us walked on stage. I veered, mouth suddenly like the Sahara, to the podium. Adjusting the microphone, I tapped on it 3 times. Why do people even do that? Cleared my throat. I could see Dustin out in the audience. He was with some of his buddies, but I didn't see Steve. I forced myself to stop looking at him and caught Holly's gaze. She gave me a thumbs up and looked so mama bear proud, I almost laughed. Good afternoon, Westburg, I said, not loud enough. I pulled the mic closer, the flare of confidence of a few moments ago withering. I wasn't sure I could do this. I stood, blinking, clutching the mic. Then this voice in my head full of attitude kicked in. You know what's hard? Your dad trying to cross the Mexican border. Being turned back again and again just to get back to you and your mom and your brothers. That's hard, girl. Your mom holding it down while working to get him home. That's hard. This is a cakewalk. Time to man up. No, girl up. Time to do this. Holly must have sensed that I needed a boost because she started clapping. A few others joined her. Peter from my French class and Paula from creative writing. I gave a nod and I did this thing. My name is Lily. Scratch that. My name is Liliana. That's it.
That's such a powerful scene when she like reclaims her name.
She reclaims her name.
It's like such a moment of her coming together and realizing that she can be who she is in this new space.
Absolutely.
I saw that some folks are going to start asking some questions. We're excited to take some questions from the audience. I also have some more ready.
Definitely. And can I just say, I'm so excited for the raffle. Everybody who's here, oh my God, like what a dream, but we'll get to that. Okay, but yeah, ask questions. I feel like teachers, educators, you don't have to be a teacher to ask a question. You know, I'm thinking too about like your experience in Meco from 4th grade to 12th grade. Was there a book when you were in Meco, like that talked about a character in Meco or like? No.
Absolutely not. No. LOL. No, absolutely not. I think when I was reading this book, not only like folks outside of Boston mostly also don't know what Meco is.
Yeah,
and so like I'm reading this book and it's like talking about Meco. It's talking about also like the ice rink that I also went on a field trip before I went to Meco too, like the streets I would walk up and down, and then talking about this experience that I think like I know folks who are who grew up in different communities and have that experience with this idea of like I'm getting on a bus and at 5 a.m. and I'm traveling, like that line that was like, people think they're lazy. How are you lazy? You like started your day at 5 a.m. to get here, and I think like that moment, like I was like 13-year-old Sujeidy was snapping away. I was like, yes, like for so many years of my life, I was up so early and got home so late. It was an after school club, so I was on the late bus, which is exactly what we called it as well, and had a host family, and it was so interesting to see all those things reflected in a way that the closest thing that I had growing up was like books about Boston busing, which is where this program derived from, but was still a different experience.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think it's important to note like that Meco was designed as a temporary solution to the segregation problem in Boston and surrounding neighborhoods. And when it started, the idea was like, oh, we won't need this for long, this won't be a problem for long. And here we are 50 plus years with Meco still. Oh, I see Des has a question. What are some effective ways to address code switching on a school by school level? Okay, I'm not sure I understand, like school by school level. Like, oh, school by school level? I'm not totally sure what does. Des, tell us more what you meant.
Hello, I'm coming on so I can help moderate the questions. If you guys are asking anything, just to keep things very clear, if you can drop them into the Q&A box at the bottom, it'll be easier for us to see them and they won't get lost in the chat.
Oh, okay.
And it looks like some people have asked them already. Let's see, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that one? Or I can carry on.
I don't totally understand the question, so help me out, Sujeidy. What do you think he's asking?
I think that's been clarified. How can schools best address code switching? I think from my point of view, I think it's talking about it openly and clearly. I think students talk about code switching all the time, especially students, but they don't know what it's called, and they'll say things that actually are like not things we want them to internalize. They'll say things like, oh, like you're talking white, or like you're acting different, and they equate like talking in a certain way with whiteness, which is like really not good, right? Like for me as a student, I remember that like thinking that like the way I was talking now that I was in Wellesley meant that I was talking like a white girl, which meant that I was equating talking in like sounding educated or using big words means that you're white, and then what does that mean about being Dominican? Does that mean that if you're Dominican you don't use big words, right? Like, and so I think explicitly naming that, and I think also being really explicit about what kind of language is necessary when, right? Like we're going to be doing a warm up where you're just brainstorming. Feel free to use casual language. Like right now we're going to like do an exit ticket. You're using formal language, right? Like even as adults, like we change the type of language we use, and I think it could be helpful to teach students the difference between formal and casual language, and so that they're not equating that with race.
Right.
Because otherwise they're having that conversation with us in the class.
Yes, yeah, not equating, not putting value on it. And you're so right. I remember like sometimes my cousins would make fun of me by calling me a white girl. So it was both like a derogatory term, and they were doing it like when I was reading or something. And I'm like, so only white people read? Like, what are we saying here?
And like, I'm Dominican. My family grew up in DR, but I was born here. And my Spanish is, for folks who are not fluent in Spanish, they would say I'm fluent in Spanish. If I'm talking to other fluent Spanish speakers, like they know I'm like conversational only, even though I cannot speak formal Spanish. But like you would never say to someone who's speaking formal Spanish, like you sound right? And so it's around like formality and casualness of conversations. And I think teaching it to kids that way is really helpful.
Yeah. And it's like, don't ask me for help on your Spanish homework. That's going to be the title for next book.
Let's see. This is a good question, I think, from Autumn Allen. Hi, Jen. Do you have advice for managing classroom dynamics when students of color are in the minority and you want to discuss a book like this without making the students of color feel put on the spot in class?
Yes, such a great question, Autumn. I've been that student who's been singled out, and all eyes on me, or the teacher explicitly says like, Jen, what do you think? And it's like, oh my God, and so there's a couple responses I have to this. One is like, I'm there to learn too. I don't know all the history, all the answers. Like I am a student in that classroom. Second, I think, again, it's like, of course, intent and impact, right? A teacher's intent might be to be inclusive of the few students of color by calling on them, but the impact can be, you're singling me out, like you're otherizing me, like we're reading something with themes that you think will resonate with me, but now I have to speak on them before I'm ready. So I think like a practical way is to have students, do some journaling, discussion, response questions before, so that when you get to the conversation, as a teacher, you can already pull from students' comments and have everyone discuss it, not have it be like, what do you think, spokesperson for all people of color? Because people don't do that to white people. When we're reading Raymond Carver, when we're reading Catcher in the Rye, I'm not like, what do you think on behalf of all white people? It's not how it works. Excuse me.
Was muted. I think we can work up chronologically through a couple of questions. The first one is from Megan McCormick, which says, where did you begin writing fiction? Did you feel like your K-12 school experience did enough to prepare you to write fiction, or did that come in college?
Great question. I learned, I think, the formal kind of writing in my K-12 education. I also in college, I didn't major in English. I majored in international relations, really, so I could travel a ton. I think I was really kind of filling the well to draw from in my writing. Teach for America gave me so much to write about, in the sense of like it just kind of crashed open my world. I would say that I didn't take creative writing seriously in the sense of like honing my craft until my 20s. And I took a class at the Boston Center for Adult Education, and like so many classrooms I've been in, it was all white women, and I felt like for years I wrote stories that I felt like I thought were good writing, and it just was like my characters were white, my antagonists were brown skinned, and like it wasn't until I took a class with Juno Diaz as part of VONA, which is a Writers of Color workshop, where he kind of pulled me aside and was like, who are you writing for? Like, who are you telling the story to? Why are you explaining half this shit on the page? Like, it just was like, oh, okay, and it really kind of changed the way that I wrote. Nobody had ever asked me that. Like, so I think my K-12 education made me feel like a confident writer when it came to like a 5-paragraph essay and all that. But in terms of like finding my voice, that really didn't happen until much later.
Sort of as a follow-up, how did your experience specifically as a teacher inspire and influence your decision to write YA? Which I think is a really interesting question of you, because your work so far and upcoming has been so broad in terms of who your audience is, what your categories are. And I feel like you're a really decisive writer, like you have a specific thing that you want to accomplish, and you learn to do that category so that you can accomplish it. So I think that's a great question. Why YA?
Why YA? Yeah, I mean, I have an MFA in fiction, and I wrote adult literary fiction. I still do, I guess, and I worked on this story with a teen protagonist for years, and I would get notes from editors from literary magazines saying, the writing is really strong. We hope you resubmit. This just isn't right for us. And I kept this story in a drawer forever, until finally a friend, Josie Figueroa, I don't know if she's here, but she forwarded me this email that told me about a writer in residence program at the Boston Public Library. And I remember reading it and thinking I couldn't apply for it because it was for children's writers. But then I looked closer and it said YA. And even though I was teaching middle school at the time, I Googled like YA, like, because I just didn't get it. I didn't understand it as a category. And once I found my lane there, I felt like I just hit the gas pedal. It was like, oh, I write YA. Like, I felt so comfortable in this lane. And I just feel like I have so many stories to tell with teen protagonists that I'll just like stay here as long as they let me.
I think that's a really good reason. And actually, I had a question, which is that this story feels like it feels really personal. And like you care about the character because you've put yourself into the character and because you've seen the character in other students. So I was wondering, well, first of all, I would love to know if you have any other books in this genre coming up. And also, if you don't, is there another story that you know you want to tell in this way to this audience that's just waiting for its moment?
Yes. I feel like that is like a huge yes. I mean, I am working on my next YA novel, and this one's set in Guatemala. And it's about a teen there who is interested in trashion, which is fashion made out of trash. And, she and her mother get into some situations. I don't want to give away too much, but I will say that they have to cross the border, the U.S.-Mexico border, and they're separated. And I just gave away a lot, didn't I? I'm like, I'm not gonna give away. Anyway.
Well, we definitely want to know what happens at this point, so.
Yeah, right, I guess that's good. And then I was just talking to a friend today, about this other idea. And so I just feel like I have a lot of stories I want to share, and I feel empowered. I feel like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe I'm doing it,
Well, I think your experience, to be totally blunt on something that's going to go on YouTube, I think your experience with this is very well written, but it's not for us, is something that a lot of marginalized writers encounter. Yeah. And I think we're finding the spots where those stories are allowed to slip in. And it's, I think, still not enough. But I'm very happy that authors like you are finding that they can come in and their book can get published and they can actually be seen by the readers who need them. And you were saying before we were beginning that you sort of wished that you were a teen with the books of now. So with that in mind, I'd like to bring up Bree's question of what would you say to your younger self if you had her as a student?
Oh, such a beautiful question, right? I mean, like, it's actually a really cool creative writing prompt, like writing a letter to your younger self. And in Wise Latinas, the anthology that I edited, there's an author, Erica Martinez. She writes, I think the piece is called "To My Younger Self." And just as a side note, real fast, she's in the DR on a Fulbright, and she's writing a letter to like herself before she moved to New York. Anyway, it's a gorgeous essay. And, I wish that I could tell my younger self to just not hide so much. Like I felt like a lot of teens do this, right? But a very practical thing, I wish I could tell my younger self, take Spanish instead of French. That's one. Be nicer to your mother, like all these things. But really, I think, I don't know, man, there's so much, but also if I changed too much, I wouldn't have had the experiences I had and be who I am. But in general, I think just reading more. I watch so much television, and it's ironic because I'm a writer, like and a teacher of literature. I'm a professor, and it's crazy, but I watch so much TV. Anyway.
There's a lot to be said for TV. It's good to balance these things out. Let's see. So this refers to a scene that's really early in the book, so I don't think it's too spoilery. This attendee says there are many compelling scenes throughout the novel, particularly on pages 22 and 23, when Liliana and her father attend a charter school lottery with poker chips and their number is not called. How difficult was it to write scenes like this? And what are techniques you use as a writer to see this important work through?
Yeah, that scene is intense. Basically, Liliana's parents, like, right out the gate, wanted her and her little brothers to have the best education possible. And for them, they, in my mind, right, like they attended these charter school lotteries. They looked into programs like Meco. They took their kids to the library and to museums. Like they tried the best they could with what they had. And in that charter school scene, the lottery, they don't get it, and he's devastated. And he goes up to the lady afterwards and he's like, you know, what can I do? I'll clean the school at night. I'll do whatever I can to get my girl in here. And excuse me, the woman says, you know, it doesn't work that way, sir, you know. And I think I wanted the reader to understand his want, his desperation to help his kids achieve something that he could not achieve, not because he wasn't able, but because of the circumstances, because of the latitude and longitude that he was born into, something he cannot control. And so in the same way, kind of like what Sujeidy was saying earlier, it's like, why should your zip code determine the education, the quality of education that you get? And that is not to say that the quality of education in Boston Public Schools is not up to par. You know, like I was a teacher in BPS, and I fought so hard for my kids, my students, you know, and it's a systemic issue, and it's a real problem. And all of which is to say that scene was hard to write because it pained me that her father needed to search for something outside of their community or outside of their neighborhood school to give her a quote unquote better education. Like that sucks, right? Like on just so many levels. Like you see people fleeing their countries, like coming here. It's complicated. It's like, think about it on a very real level. Like, do you want to leave your home? Like, do you want to pack everything that you love in a backpack and you know, jump on a train and like ride for days, not knowing what's going to happen and if you're ever going to see the people that you love again? Like, do you feel like doing that tomorrow? No. So I guess I tried to find ways to offer that window and that experience to readers through a story, because we remember stories more than facts and statistics, and the history that we do have is often, almost always, incomplete anyway.
Yeah. So sort of talking about stories, we have another question from somebody else who's anonymous, which is, do you have any advice as to how to foster a love of reading in multilingual learners?
Yes, I mean, the thing about reading is like, there's so much to say, right? But because I think sometimes, again, our intention is like, I see this with my son, like I'll give him a stack of books and be like, you love these, right? Right? You know, he's like, no. And so then I kind of peeled back, like, all right, what is he interested in? What does he want? And then maybe it's like a Lego book or a book about a cartoon and there are like 3 words in it. And the teacher in me is cringing, like, that's not a real book. You know, like, but I try to like refocus, and I just get so excited. And I'm like, yes, I will buy that for you, even though it's $16, you know, or like, we will get that from the library, and you'll do your sticker chart and celebrate the books that you've read this summer, all that. And before I blinked, he was off, you know? So I feel like maybe reframing what it looks like to get someone into reading.
Absolutely. I think that's something that bookstores and schools and libraries all have in common, is that they're meeting the students where they are, and they're seeing that what parents want them to be reading isn't always the thing that is going to satisfy them and move them forward and bring them joy and engagement. So I think that's really important. Sort of related to that, not in the question box, but I have the question, is that I have noticed, and this is not true for all languages, but I have noticed, especially in books with Latinx and also Nigerian characters, more mainstream publishers are allowing like Spanish and Igbo to actually enter the vocabulary of the book without any extra commentary. And I think, as a white person, that's a new experience, and it's really interesting and engaging. But do you think that that has a dramatic impact on multilingual students' experience of reading in English, like bringing it closer to them?
Totally. I mean, right in the classroom, Suhaiti, like seeing students. Yeah, I see you nodding. Like that. It's what Walter Dean Myers called the shock of recognition, when you see yourself on the page and you're like, oh my God, my mom says that word or whatever. I had that experience reading House on Mango Street. I'm like, this is in Spanish. I wanted to like tell people in my dorm, like, this is in Spanish. Like, I can't believe this. I've never seen a book like this that was not in church, that was in Spanish. And like, so that's huge. And it's funny you say Nigeria, because I did an internship in Nigeria and lived with a family. And he's Igbo, she's Yoruba. And it was just very, I don't know, it was really cool. It's great to see so much literature by Nigerian authors. And
yeah, there's like a groundswell of it in American publishing right now. I just read The Death of Vivek Oji, which was phenomenal. But that was one of those books where like the language is just incorporated, and I think it allows the books to breathe so much more.
Yeah, and it makes, I think, multilingual readers stronger readers. And kids, it's literally my son's in second grade. His teacher had them do this activity where they had to look at the letters in the word second grade and come up with a bunch of smaller words using those letters. So, he came up with a list, and then all of a sudden his eyes got big and he was like, CON. And I'm like, oh, con, like pro and con. And he goes, no, con, like with. And he's like, can I write words in Spanish? And I was like, oh my God, like I had the biggest reaction. And he was like, he's used to it. I'm like, yes. So it's a surplus to know more than one language versus a deficit, right? I mean, didn't you see that in the classroom, Suhi? Like kids?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it reads authentically, right? Like, I think I remember books that would be like, my abuela, grandmother, and it's like, that's not how I think. Like, I sub one word for the other. And so it is like a level of authenticity when the author is doing that without commentary. Yeah, but like, I still listen to it.
I think the idea that being monolingual is a good thing is such a specifically American thing as well, a white American thing. And I think being forced out of that mindset is very good. So I think it's most important that readers who belong to the culture that are being represented in the book, that's what's most important, that they feel at home there. It's also important to tell people like me that we need to like get outside our comfort zones and acknowledge that having more ways of expressing yourself makes you a more empathetic and capable like member of society. So yeah, I think it's great. I think we have time for like one or two more questions, and then we can do the raffle and sign off for the evening. I think this is really interesting because you've been talking a lot about the students, especially, that this writing is for. And Chris would like to know sort of the other side of that, which I think is relevant to a lot of our audience, which is there is so much in your novel that operates as an active anti-racism playbook for adult educators, particularly those who work in schools that have Metco programs. Is there a particular salient moment in the novel, without getting too much away, where you really hoped that the educators in the audience would listen up, learn, and feel, positive or negative?
Woo, it's good. Oh my gosh. I think this is Chris, who is a librarian in the BPL, Copley. Okay. And we have an event tomorrow actually at noon. So if you're an educator listening, you can bring your class. It's free. It's at 12. But this question is huge. I mean, I would love for the book to be considered an active role in I guess perpetuating these discussions of anti-racism. And I'm so honored, like that the book, teachers are emailing me to do book clubs among teachers and among staff, because I wrote this book for students. I wrote it for my younger self. I wrote it for the students that I had, all of that. But what's so great is like, I think when you do an honest deep dive to like one reader and you tell a true story, even if in fiction, it can resonate in unexpected ways with other audiences, which is great. But I think, you know, having teachers read about Liliana's experience and the experience of students of color in PWI, predominantly white institutions, can be eye-opening and can help them build empathy and understand their microaggressions that they're experiencing. You know, like, do you need a laptop? But then also on the flip side, okay, so you're a sophomore now, you're going to need this graphing calculator. PS, it's $125, you know? So I feel like it's hard, man. It's hard being a teacher, but I think this book will hopefully help open some blind spots, expose some blind spots, which we all have. Like, I never want to be like, I know about anti-racism and I wrote a book and read it. You know, it's like, oh, you know, I just think it needs to be something where we're all just like open and honest and asking those tough questions, having those hard conversations, but also, I don't know, I guess doing it with a character in fiction in a book is, I don't know if it's the right word, but it's a little safer than being like, it can be a bridge to those harder conversations is what I'm saying.
One theme that stands out for me is the first time that Liliana writes her paragraph in creative writing, about that fear she overcame, and her teacher reads it and she's like getting so into it, she's like writing and her teacher reads it and it's like, this is fiction, right? And she's like, yeah, totally. And then is struggling with creative writing and doesn't want to go. And I think that it's a moment that teachers should read over and over again, because there's so many moments where students open up to us and let us see their authentic self. And in that moment, she shut her down and turn her away from this thing that was her favorite thing, is to write. So as educators, I think it's so important for us to think about actions that we do and what is the consequence on very real children when we don't do that. And that moment, I think, stuck out to me.
That's so good. Yeah.
I actually think that's a great place to close out. So first of all, thank you both so much, Jen. I am so excited for people to read this book, and I'm so glad that we were able to do this event tonight. And again, if everyone would like to see her talk about this book in even more ways, tomorrow, 12 noon, free event with the BPL. And if you buy books, they will also go to us and she will also sign them, which is all very good. So just before we go, we have, of course, our raffle. So I'm dropping all of the names in now, and I wish I could show you, but then you would see everybody's names, and that seems like a confidentiality issue. So I have clicked the button, and it looks like our winner is Leslie Garcia. Are you here today? Let's see. I think you are. Let's see. Let's see. So I don't see Leslie now. Maybe I'll draw one more time. Do you think? We'll draw one more time.
Oh no, Leslie, where are you? Oh, this is hysterical. Oh my God, I love everybody. Oh, getting a class set. I mean, this Teach for America, thank you so much. Grace and Josh, everybody. This started off these events, it's so many emails and everything. And Alex, you've been so amazing. And when Grace was like, yeah, we can donate a class set and raffle it off, I was like, oh my God. Because as a teacher,
yeah,
when you're excited about a book, you so want everyone to hold it.
You want them in your hands. You want it all kids' hands.
That does remind me.
We're just gonna have independent reading for the first 30 minutes.
Oh my God, I know independent reading. There's a scene with independent reading. It doesn't go so well here, but anyway, there's a reader's guide that's free online on Simon & Schuster if you do want to teach the book. And contact me through my website if you're teaching the book and you want me to zoom in with students. Oh my God, that's totally something I can do.
All right.
Oh, who was it? Leslie Garcia. Oh man, Leslie Garcia, man. You got to stay for the raffle.
That was a mistake. Okay. Do we have? Yes, we have Kara Hamilton here.
Kara, please say you're here.
Yay! All right, so Kara Hamilton, you are the winner of this class set of books. I will be in touch with you after this. So you'll get an email from me tomorrow and we'll make that happen. So once again, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I think this was a fantastic conversation about a really wonderful book. Thank you for being here. Buy books and bring them to your students because they will thank you and Jen. So I think that's it for us tonight. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to say?
I just want to say that if it's the Kara Hamilton who I think it is, she's in a Boston public school.
Excellent.
And like BLA, yes, Esta, BLA. So this could not be more like full circle. Like I'm gonna cry.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Sujeidy. Thank you, Alex.
No, thank y'all.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.